Alright, so I'm out here at the Pete and Pole Fly-In at Broadhead, Wisconsin, and ran into a guy that I've been following on social for some time, Dennis, who just built this Highlander 100-something hours ago, but built it with a Yamaha, a naturally aspirated NA 150 horsepower Yamaha. We're gonna dive deep into his build here right now. Dennis, before I forget, I want to share this with everybody. What did your airplane do wrong that you put it in timeout? It's nosed up against the hangar right now. That's the first thing I noticed walking across this field. It's like, what did that airplane do?
He's been a very bad boy.
He's in timeout.
Yeah, he's in timeout. We just hunkered him down for the weather tonight. We're expecting some real nasty 70-mile-an-hour winds, so we're hoping we're shielded from it.
Okay, so when you're out in a big field, guys, you're out flying, if you can find a hangar or anything to shield the wind, put your airplane in timeout.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Dennis, so jumping back into the conversation on this Highlander here, I like to ask people, like, going through this kit, what is the first project that you decided to start on, our first subassembly?
We actually started on the fuselage, just crammed it in our basement, and the day after we brought it home and sort of kind of got everything hung on the wall or set on sawhorses, the fuselage on sawhorses, I believe we started drilling holes for the floor pans, matching the aluminum plates in the floors to the tabs on the fuselage. So yeah, all seat mounting and interior of the fuselage was the first thing we attacked.
You wanted to sit in this thing is what it was.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, we sat in and made airplane noises, posted online. You know, we thought we were going to be STOL drag racers, but my heels have cooled quite a bit since finishing, and that it's just fun. I don't want to bend it, you know, just want to enjoy it. And that. But,
so is that you mentioned the STOL drag? Is that the big driving force behind choosing the Highlander?
No, I think the engine was, believe it or not. Yeah, and that probably Steve Henry did influence it a little bit, but I always dreamed of building a Sonics B or YXB, and I was even thinking of the Yamaha engine in it, and it just seemed like a better idea to put it in a slower airplane, and I think it belongs in this airplane, and it's fantastic, and just
this is a huge pivot from a Sonics.
Yes, yeah, it is. Another thing,
the high wing and the big tires, but everything.
Another thing, I could fly from my home with it. I have a 650-foot strip that I've flown off for 18 years, and I always flew my Kolb out of there. And it dawned on me one day, hey, I won't have to pay hangar rent if I build a Highlander instead of a Sonics. And my kid came to me out of the blue. He said, Dad, we ever think about building a bush plane? I'm like, well, I have a bush plane. I have a Kolb. He goes, no, I mean a bush plane. And I love my Kolb and that, but
a proper bush plane.
Yeah, a proper bush plane. I said, oh yeah, like every day of my life. And for some reason, the kid don't fly or nothing, but it just struck a nerve with me, and I just said, you know what? We're gonna find one, and then we started searching around, and luckily we found a unstarted kit that had been sitting on the shelf for a fella's beautiful man cave for 7 years. All
right, so Dennis, the other thing, walking up to your aircraft immediately, you've got these I don't know, racing tape going on here.
Yeah, I got the ugly landing gear option here.
Yeah, so explain the why you did this.
Well, I had originally built the airplane with covered gear. And at a certain point, I decided I want steps. You can step on the tire and get in and out, but my mom's, you know, she's not a spring chicken anymore, and she likes to ride with me, and so I designed a step to go on it, and I clamp it on with some rubber mounted U-bolts. So I took the fabric off the gear, and of course the gear is very draggy. It's got 3 down tubes on it, and immediately lost like 12 miles an hour.
12 miles an hour?
Yeah, and so we're 780 miles away from home right now, and when we were planning this trip up here, I thought, you know what, I would like to have that 12 mile an hour back for the trip. So I got myself some 6-inch wide 3M rubber tape. It's like a ice padding tape of some sort, and just started wrapping it. And I got 10 mile an hour back with it as best I can measure, you know. And we're cruising at 4.75 gallons per hour exactly up here. We had 2 fuel stops, one after 3.9 hours. we put 18.4 gallon in 3.9 hours, and that worked out to 4.7. And then the second stop was a little over 2 hours, and we put, gosh, I forget the math on it, but it was 4.8. So we're an honest 5 gallon an hour. We're on the good side of that.
And at what RPM is that cruise for you?
8,000 RPM.
8,000 RPM is considered a cruise RPM.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and it actually is. A lot of guys cruise these 8,600, and I could do that, and it'll go 100 mile an hour at that speed. But with the gear taped, with the gear untaped, it'll go 90 at 8,600.
Well, that is an incredible gain by simply putting some wide tape on your landing.
Yeah, and we'll do it right someday. Here, I have to figure out what I'm going to do. I probably need to buy a second set of gear and do some welding on it so I can mount steps, maybe even make proper steps and still put fabric around them somehow. But you know, I just needed this. I want economy, and we're flying some distance, so 10 mile an hour, you can't trade that, you know.
So while we're down here, let's take a look at the suspension. What kind of suspension are you running on your Highlander?
I have TK1 shocks, mated to the Extreme Just Aircraft's Extreme gear legs. That's their bigger gear legs. It's not the big TK gears like Steve runs, but the TK shocks are just amazing. Cam locks on this cowling that have to go in your pocket when you take it off, or they'll fall out.
I'm at the airport a lot more these days editing, and walking out of the FBO out onto the ramp, it's bright. So I've been wearing my Flying Eyes eyewear a lot more these days. They're lightweight, extremely comfortable, flexible, and have micro-thin temples that slip under your headsets. You like saving money? Get 10% off right now by using the code EXPERIMENTAL. Check out the links below. We are partnering with great companies like Dynon Avionics at Dynon.com. Airtech Coatings at airtechcoatings.com. Clemens Insurance at clemensinsurance.net. The Aviators Clinic at aviatorsclinic.com. Diamond Doors at diamonddoors.com. Flying Eyes at flyingeyesoptics.com. Take a moment to go visit their websites at the links found below in the description of this video. And visit our website at experimentalaircraftchannel.com for events, our video library arranged in easy-to-find playlists on specific topics, affiliate products, aviation merchandise, and so much more. All right, Dennis, so on to the main event. What everybody's been waiting to see uncowled here is your Yami. So explain again where you got this and what size engine it is and all that.
Okay, this is a 2007 Yamaha Apex out of a Yamaha Apex snowmobile. I had 7,200 miles on it when I bought it from Travis Hipschman out in central PA. And he gave me a good price on it. I cleaned it up. It had a little oil and stuff on it, and I actually used Marvel Mist Oil and Scotch-Brite to clean it up. That's the best I could do. I've got a spare engine I had built by Casey Hawk up in Rice Lake, Wisconsin. It's a beautiful vapor-honed and powder-coated engine that'll be the backup for this when it's time to cycle this one out. I'll have him zero time this one. We don't know how long these engines are going to go for sure, so I'm going to have a 2-engine rotation where I just have a professional zero time them to keep, stay safe. And I want it to look as good as Till's Gearbox. I want the engine to look better than this.
So you bought the sled.
Yeah, bought the engine right out of the sled.
Right out of the sled. Yeah. Got pretty much everything from that you're utilizing in the aircraft.
Yes.
What did you have to do in preparation for being a flight engine?
In flight engine, I sent the wiring harness to Ian Bange down in Texas, down in Houston, and he modifies it to take care of the limp modes that would put you out of the air that the snowmobile has that you don't want in an airplane. And he does a real nice professional job. He made a new injection harness and everything for it. Now he sells all new harnesses. But yeah, I set that out for him. I bought Steve Henry's motor mount because he's done it right in the Highlander for the longest. He knows what he's doing. So it's the same motor mount that he puts on his 300 horse turbo. and I bought the radiator that they sell. I think it's Steve's radiator he recommends for it. I built the header from a mock-up kit from GP Headers over here, and they copied my PVC mock-up kit and made it close. Kind of missed a little bit on it. I've got a little bit of a pipey power band between 3,000 and 5,000 RPM, but you don't fly in those RPMs. But when you're trying to spot land or taxi, it can be a little, it's pipey. So one day I'll buy Steve or Brian Dacus's.
And you think the exhaust is what smooths that out?
Oh, it's for sure the header, for sure. I've flown with a buddy in Minnesota with one with a screwed modified cheap Suzuki header that he modified to fit the Yamaha engine, and if you look at a pipework, you'd think it's going to work at all, and it's like an electric motor from bottom to top. So
you think is it too much flow?
I don't know. I've got really good peak horsepower. Okay. I know that. That's why it's still on there, because it does rip. But
quick question on that.
Yeah, it's pipey.
I'm not very familiar. From Florida, we don't have snowmobiles. Obviously, we have wave runners and motorcycles, and the R1. Right, with 1,000cc engine.
Yes.
They had an X-up system in the exhaust, and there was a stepper motor that would operate an exhaust valve. Do the sleds have that same system?
I believe that the post 2011 and 2011 to 2018 Apexes might have. There's something different about the exhaust, and I think it might be that X-up.
Okay.
I may be wrong.
Now that's more of a street application, because you got low end torque when you're starting off versus a high end, high RPM, and you're only utilizing the higher RPM.
Yeah, for flying, you're always, we cruise as low. Today I was out with Kenneth Howes, and we were cruising around 6,500 RPM, and you're loafing. And we were, I guess we were going about 61, 65. We were trying to average for the winds, flying cardinal headings and that. And yeah, it's no problem to cruise 6,500 RPM. Just pull the trim back, trim it way up, nose high, and it runs fine at 65. It runs fine at 55 if you put flaps in. I've cruised around with ultralights with a notch of flaps in, and I don't want to, but anything below 5,000 taxiing with the motor loaded, because you're not moving forward, it'll fall off to 3,000, or if you're coming up trying to do 4,000, you'll jump from 3 to 5,000. You got a 2,000 RPM dead band in there. It's like a 125 dirt bike, if you ever rode.
So it kind of acts like a two-stroke, where it hits a power band, gets pissed off.
It runs like a 125 motocrosser. It does. It absolutely does. And I had a lot of 125 motocrosser time when I was skinnier. Clear? Clear.
Little blip. Flipping around to the other side, let's talk about the tank and the custom intake manifold and all that stuff.
Okay, stock stuff you want when you take an engine out of a sled. You got your oil reservoir, because it's a dry sump, and you got your voltage regulator, and I'm not running an oil cooler yet. I'm running full synthetic Mobil 1 530, and it has a coolant to oil cooler right built in beside the oil filter here. It just circulates oil through one set of passages and coolant through another set of passages in this little guy here, and it keeps the oil fairly under control. We're flying some hot weather and with a heavy load on this trip, and we're up toward the upper where you want to be, but it's not going into the red. We're staying well within the synthetic oil range for it, and I've never had any oil tests that came back with thermal breakdown of the oil. Okay, I'm moving on to my airbox. This is my own design. I should have had a screwdriver here to pull this off and show you. It's got a 4-inch K&N style filter on it, and it's an aluminum. How about this? and got a 4-inch intake there, and you can look in and see the, I'll let you check out the intake bellows, the velocity stacks I'd call them in there from the engine. Okay. And they fit through the wall of my airbox exactly how they do in the Yamaha airbox. The big difference is I have way more intake area than the stock Yamaha airbox, so it breathes a whole lot better, and it probably gets a little bit of ram air effect coming in. I get home and it's going to need cleaned. This is pretty grody. We're eating a lot of bugs on the way out here. But yeah, I got a little rubber isolated standoff on it, and then after that it's just all in the throttle body intake boots that you see up there, and she working pretty good. You put all the sensors in the places Yamaha had it in their airbox. I think this is intake, air temperature intake. So the ECU's hidden back here underneath the airbox down in there. The ECU's head. Now I put all the electronics on the cool side of the engine. You got the exhaust side on that side, and they're 1400 degree exhaust. Didn't seem like a good place to put it, and everything's running good so far. We're mounted to the heat sink of the firewall, and this is my rectifier voltage going through the firewall to the battery. And then it's also, I have a low oil reservoir. The dipstick on the sled comes with this great float switch that you can hook right in series with your 12 volts in your light. And you got a light, if that light would light in there, I know I'm losing oil.
So let's talk about this gearbox from Skytrax, aka Teal Jenkins. When you get that in the box, is it a big deal to bolt it on, or what's the kind of procedure for getting it bolted on?
I think it was about an hour-long job.
That's it?
Yeah, and I had, honestly, I had prepped for it. You remove the output shaft cover assembly. It has about 14 bolts. Some of them are exposed, some of them are internal to the back half of the gearbox. You see where the gearbox splits. You basically replace the output shaft cover plate that has the carrier bearing and the seals in with his gearbox, duplicates what that does, and it uses all those mounting bolts. I think there's 14 of them, so like I say, some are inside the gearbox, and it just bolts on there. And then you use a bolt on your output shaft to put the primary gear on, and then there's an intermediate gear a little bit bigger, and it's just an idler gear on a real nice heavy duty roller bearing setup. And then the output gear is a big guy. So and that's got the Sprag gear set on the output shaft, and so you can see that the prop cannot flywheel the motor, so that breaks up your resonance. It's what makes this installation so smooth. The engine pushes the prop, but the prop can't flywheel the engine, so it doesn't get fighting itself, and it makes for a very smooth setup. It's the left side. I fly from the right side, so this don't feel like at home.
All right, Dennis, let's talk about the performance of this Yamaha in this aircraft, the Highlander. What are you seeing on takeoff and climb out?
Just sheer awesomeness.
Yeah?
No. Takeoff, my shortest recorded takeoff roll without any appreciable headwind was 140 feet. And that was in the middle of winter with a dusting of snow on the ground, so we had really good conditions for good performance. So 140 foot is my shortest measured takeoff. Climb out solo with maybe 15 gallon of fuel in it. It'll climb out 1,600 feet a minute all day long. Coming up here, we're loaded. We have 33 gallon of fuel in the plane. When we left home, we had 125 pounds of baggage, and me and my buddy were both 200 pounders. So we were still under the 1320 sport plane weight, but climbing out in the hot weather, we were getting 700, we'd peak at 800 now and then, 700 feet a minute. It felt like a mere mortal. And then out here, we had it loaded up again at both our fuel stops. I noticed it was climbing 800, 850 feet a minute. And the air's rough, you're bouncing around, maybe get some convective lift, you know, but she's pretty good. She's pretty good. That's what it specializes in. I tell people, if you want an airplane that goes up really well and comes down really well, this is your plane.
Yeah, it's not really a fast cross-country aircraft, but no, it's kind of typical for a STOL, right?
Yeah, we cruise. I like to cruise at 80 knots or 90 mile an hour, and it'll cruise at 100, no problem. At 90 mile per hour or 80 knots, we burn 4.75 gallon per hour, and we checked it carefully, topping it off each time and doing the math. No transponder. I kept it light, and I like to hide from the feds. Anyhow, I always go back to Grand Rapids technology, and these. I've had one in my cold for 18 years and never had even a probe fail on it. Garmin radio, GTR 200B with a Bluetooth. It's fantastic. Best radio I ever used. And I have jet pilots that fly with me to tell me that's such a good radio. Anyhow, simple, light, single needle altimeter, just super lightweight. Just a basic airspeed indicator from Corey Sloan's when he went to glass in his plane. Thanks, Corey. And yeah, just cheap level gauge because they're cheap. And I put one here thinking I'm flying from this side, but I prefer flying from the right side. So I stuck one in over here, and I should have put it up higher. It's out of sight, but we're getting good at flying it now, so it's usually in the middle. After about 100 hours, I finally learned how to keep the bubble in the middle.